Against all odds, the story of Betty Ann. Do you know how far you would go for the people you love? What would you be willing to give up to save your family? Would you drop everything, your career, your comfort, even your entire life to fight for someone who couldn't fight for themselves? What would you do if your brother, your only brother, was sent to prison for a crime he didn't commit? Would you sit and wait, hoping someone else would fix it? Or would you do the unthinkable? This is the story of a woman named Betty Ann who had to face that exact nightmare. She was a high school dropout. She didn't have a law degree, didn't have money, didn't even have a real plan. And then one day, her brother was arrested and sentenced to prison not for something he did, but for something he didn't. Imagine that phone call, the one that changes your life forever. You hear the news, and suddenly your world just stops. Most people would break down. Most people would say, "There's nothing I can do." But Betty Ann didn't. She didn't just sit there. She made a decision, one that people around her thought was absolutely insane. She decided to go to law school. Can you imagine that? A high school dropout with no legal background, applying to law school? People laughed at her. They told her it was impossible, that it was a waste of time, that she couldn't do it. But she didn't listen. She pushed through every laugh, every doubt, every "you'll never make it." Law school is brutal. It's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, filled with mountains of books and endless exams. But Betty Ann wasn't just a student, she was also a mother. She had 2 young sons to raise, Ben, who was 4, and Richard, who was 6. Picture this. She goes to school all day, then comes home to take care of her boys, and after they fall asleep, she stays up late into the night, studying until her eyes can't stay open. On top of that, she worked nights to pay the bills. The pressure, the loneliness, the grief. It must have been unbearable, but she didn't quit. Every time she wanted to give up, she thought about her brother sitting behind bars, and that image pushed her forward. 1 year passed, then another, then another. Slowly, the impossible started to look possible. But here's the truth. Big dreams always come with big sacrifices. While other people her age were building stable careers, getting married, and buying homes, Betty Ann was drowning in books, scraping by financially, and losing relationships left and right. Her marriage fell apart. Her husband couldn't understand why her entire life seemed dedicated to her brother's case. He told her she loved her brother more than she loved him, and in the end, he left. That pain could have broken her, but instead, it lit her fire even more. She knew what this fight would cost. She knew the price of chasing something everyone else thought was hopeless, but she refused to let her brother spend the rest of his life in a cell for a crime he didn't commit. So she doubled down. She poured everything into her studies, into her boys, and into the dream of freedom. After more than a decade of sacrifice, exhaustion, and tears, Betty Ann graduated. She was now a lawyer. Imagine that moment, holding that diploma in her hands, knowing that the whole reason she started the brother still trapped behind bars wasn't free yet. But now, she had the weapon she needed. Her very first case as a lawyer? Her own brother's. Just imagine that pressure. Your first time in court, your first arguments, your first filings. And it's not for a random client, it's for the person you love most in the world. She knew she couldn't do it alone. That's when she teamed up with the Innocence Project, a group dedicated to freeing wrongly convicted people. Together, they searched through every piece of evidence, every report, every forgotten file. And then, they found something that would change everything. DNA evidence. Evidence that everyone thought had been destroyed. Evidence that could finally reveal the truth. When the DNA tests came back, the results were undeniable. It wasn't her brother. The evidence didn't match, which meant the real criminal was still out there, and her brother had been sitting in prison for nothing. Think about that. 18 years stolen. But even with DNA on their side, freedom didn't come immediately. The system resisted. Judges hesitated. Appeals dragged on. Hearings were delayed. For 2 more years, Betty Ann fought tooth and nail, knowing the truth was right there in her hands, but still having to convince the system to listen. Can you imagine that kind of torment? To hold proof of innocence, and yet every night your brother is still behind bars? But she didn't give up. She couldn't. And finally, after almost 2 decades, the gates opened. Her brother walked free. What do you think that moment felt like? After 18 long years, he stepped out of prison into the sunlight. Free. At last. Not because the system fixed itself. Not because someone gave him a second chance, but because his sister refused to quit. Betty Ann gave 12 years of her life to law school, sacrificed her marriage, lost her comfort, endured endless pain, all for this moment. And here's what her story tells us. Love is stronger than fear. Determination is stronger than doubt. And purpose is stronger than pain. So let me ask you, what's the fight in your life that you've been too afraid to start? What dream have you abandoned because it seemed too hard, too impossible, too far out of reach? Betty Ann's story proves something powerful. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need to have the most money. You don't even need to start with the perfect plan. You just need to refuse to quit. Because sometimes, love doesn't just wait. Love goes to law school. Love fights for 12 years. Love frees a brother. And maybe, just maybe, love will help you fight for what you believe in too.